The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Well. We got breaking news from the NFL, which sheds a different light on the Baltimore Ravens and their quest to win the division and advance and maybe even get to the Super Bowl this year. I'll get to that in just a moment. Mike Locksley talked yesterday about Maryland's matchup against Michigan on Saturday, which is very meaningful nationally. I mean, it's a mismatch where Michigan's favored by 3 touchdowns to win, but because of the attention on Jim Harbaugh, that puts Maryland directly in the spotlight. And we'll hear what Locksley says about that. Ron Rivera said something the other day. He does an interview every Monday with Chick Hernandez on Channel 9. And Chick put it to him like, well, Sam Howell, he's the dude, right? And you'd think after everything that we've heard from Rivera in the last 5 or 6 weeks that he'd jump right on it. Oh, yeah, he's our guy, high development. He kind of double-clutched on that, and we'll get to that in the 10 o'clock hour. The breaking news, if you're just jumping in your car, is that the Cleveland Browns got news today that Deshaun Watson is out for the year. He underwent an MRI on Monday on 2 injuries. This is a statement that they put out, sustained on different plays in the first half of Sunday's 33-31 win over the Baltimore Ravens. Imaging on his left ankle revealed a high ankle sprain. In addition, post-game, Deshaun Watson notified our medical staff of a new discomfort in his right shoulder that he felt after a hit in the first half. An MRI of his right shoulder revealed a displaced fracture. Despite performing at a high level and finishing the game after consultation with the team physicians, it has been determined that the injury will require immediate surgical repair to avoid further structural damage. Deshaun will be placed on season-ending injured reserve, and a full recovery is expected for the start of the 2024 season. There's a lot of different angles on this. Number one is the Cleveland Browns themselves. They have a Super Bowl caliber defense. Okay, they've been building for a long time, and they thought with what they paid that they would have their quarterback. They knew last year they wouldn't have their quarterback the whole season because he did get an 11-game suspension, but they knew this year that he was back, and they expected him to be able to play. He battled through some injuries, came back, played very well on Sunday against Baltimore, and they won the game. And now they're only a half game behind the Ravens in the division. But they're going to have to go the rest of the way without him, and I don't think without Deshaun Watson they have any chance of being a Super Bowl team, which brings up the larger debate about these guaranteed contracts. And the Browns were the first to do this. They gave him $240 million, and they said it's all guaranteed. And the other owners went, oh, we never do that. You guaranteed all the money? Oh, my God, this is going to be a game changer. Turned out to be an outlier, because the other owners didn't do it. The other quarterback contracts, that we've seen with like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, those guys got big deals, big money deals, but they didn't get it fully guaranteed in the way that Deshaun Watson has it in Cleveland. And the big issue for the other owners is, okay, maybe this is a support for them saying this is what happens. You can't give a football player guaranteed money because the injuries are so certain. Every player in the league is going to get hurt at some point, and whether or not it's a season-ending injury, as it apparently is now for Deshaun Watson, a season-ending injury for Kirk Cousins a couple of weeks ago, and that's the guy who never got hurt throughout his long career in the NFL. It's going to happen, and that's why you just can't guarantee money. So this is going to rage all day on sports radio and on ESPN. All the talking heads are going to be yapping about this. Well, look at you, Cleveland. And this is, the Cleveland Browns are the Cleveland Browniest of teams. Like Charlie Brown always got the football yanked out from under him as he was attempting to kick with Lucy holding. This is what always happens to them. Something like this always occurs. Like Monday morning, Browns fans are saying, okay, we're on track here. We're 6-3. Our defense is playing great. Our quarterback was hurt a little bit in the early part of the season, but now he's ready to go, played well in the second half, beat one of the best teams in the NFL. And now, and now they have to go the rest of the way without their highly paid quarterback, who I'm sure messes with the salary cap to a large degree, and they really whatever hopes they had of going deep into the playoffs are now apparently gone, with Deshaun Watson gone for the year. All right, I'll get back to this at some point, but there's other things I want to plow through this morning, including Brandon Hyde, who was named American League Manager of the Year. I don't think that was any surprise whatsoever, but a really good couple of days for the Baltimore Orioles, as they now have the American League Rookie of the Year, and now they have the American League Manager of the Year. And the voting really wasn't close, and it should not have been. I mean, this is a team that was projected to win 80 games this year. They won 101. They won their division, and amazingly, were not swept in the regular season. In fact, they weren't swept going back to when Adley Rutschman came up in May of 2022. And they were finally swept in the playoffs by the Texas Rangers, who went on to win the World Series. Now, this is a regular season award. Doesn't have anything to do with the postseason. So Hyde got 27 of the 30 first-place votes. The runner-up was Bruce Bochy, who got the other 3 votes, and Kevin Cash finished third in the voting. And this was last night, and it was really cool the way they do this on the MLB Network. When Gunnar Henderson won MVP the other night, Cal Ripken introduced him. Last night, although he's not affiliated with the Orioles, Joe Maddon was the mentor to Brandon Hyde when they worked together with the Cubs, and I think they may have been in Tampa together as well. And so this was the announcement made last night by Joe Maddon.
Okay, it's my pleasure to announce the 2023 American League Manager of the Year Award to a very good friend of mine, Mr. Brandon Hyde.
But it's okay, Brandon. They don't need to be quiet. They can come into the shot and give you a hug if you want. Congratulations to the manager of the Baltimore Orioles. Who's in the shot with you right now, Brandon?
All right, we got my daughters, Aria and Addison, and my beautiful wife, Lisa. And Colton is at basketball practice.
As he should. As he should. Well, hey, we're going to ask you questions. We're so excited for you and your family. I want to show the voting total and how close this was. Again, so many terrific candidates for the American League Manager of the Year. And you see here 144 total points. Brandon got 27 of the 30 first-place votes. The other 3 went to Bruce Bochy, who finished second, Kevin Cash third, Rocco Baldelli of the Twins finished fourth, and Dusty Baker with 4 total points finished fifth. Brandon, that was, when you look at a panel that's got Bruce Bochy and Kevin Cash, and your name was just called for this honor, what does it mean to you?
Well, first of all, just thankful, extremely thankful. And how special it is for me to have Joe, announce it, because this guy means the world to me and a huge mentor for me. But to be on the panel with 2 guys that I have unbelievable amount of respect for, 2 just great managers and what they do. And Boch is a Hall of Fame manager, and Kevin Cash is incredible. Unfortunately, we're in the same division, and I got to see him all the time. But I'm just super blessed and honored, and feel great for the organization.
So that's Brandon Hyde at home with his family when the news was announced by Joe Maddon that he had won, the celebration in the house. Interesting, the kid is out playing basketball, not playing baseball, but okay, it's the fall. So you understand that. This is more from Hyde as he did a news conference with Baltimore reporters after it was over. And remember, this is the guy who took over in a complete rebuild in 2018. And just 2 years ago, they lost 110 games. It doesn't usually work out this way. It doesn't usually work that the guy who took all the pain is still around when the success comes. Normally they have a guy who takes you to that point, and then you bring in a veteran guy to try and win a World Series. But they have stuck with Brandon Hyde, and the players seem to respond to him. He had a great second half of the 2022 season, and then last year they didn't go wire to wire because they fell behind pretty early to Tampa, which got off on an incredible start. But they caught them, and they stayed out in front for the rest of the year and won 101 games. I mean, there's only been like 2 or 3 Oriole teams in history that have won over 100 games, and Brandon Hyde managed to get that done. He was asked about the journey to get there after managing a team that did lose 110 games just 2 years ago.
I knew I had confidence that we were going to turn this thing around, but you struggle to see when. You see the light at the end of the tunnel, honestly. Last year there came a point where you saw the light at the end of the tunnel where you could see that we were able to pitch against the teams we were competing against, that we were able to compete, win series. So really from June on last year, that was a huge turning point for this organization and our big league club. But to come as far back, to come as far as we have, you look at the roster in 19 and 20, it's a lot of different players and a lot of homegrown guys and a lot of guys that we've developed at the big league level, and so you feel good about that.
He should. He's done a tremendous job, and really doesn't get too high or too low. He's really got a really good feel for his young club. This was about when he knew that this team had it. Like, going into the season, a lot of people, including, the prognostications from like Fangraphs that they would win 80 games was, well, they may take a step back after this really great finish that they had in 2022. But they came out of the box well and then kept going, and this was when he knew that he had a team that was capable of doing what it eventually did.
I knew we were a good club, and but I thought when we went into Tampa and won 3 out of 4, kind of the way we did, kind of looking back, for me, that was a little bit of the turning point for us, and how we won those games too, and won 3 close games. And I thought that gave our team a lot of confidence that we could go on the road against a first place club that had been, quite a bit ahead of us early in the year, but go in and win 3 out of 4 on a really tough place to play that we have never played well since I've been there, and to win 3 games there, for me, that was the turning point for us.
Yeah, I believe that was in June. In early May, Tampa came here, and they were red hot. They came out flying, and the Orioles beat them in 2 out of 3. And again, the amazing streak, and it will continue next year, even though they were swept in the playoffs by Texas. They have not been swept in a series since May of 2022. Really remarkable, and great job by Brandon Hyde this year with the Orioles, and the team hopefully will be even better next year. Nationals made a couple of moves. I don't know if Tony will be talking about this coming up at 11 o'clock. I'm sure he will. Dominic Smith has been designated for assignment. So the guy that drives Tony crazy, Dominic Smith, will not be a part of the Nationals in the upcoming season. We do a little basketball here. A big college basketball preseason tournament last night. Well, not preseason, but pre-conference tournament, I should say. And they usually had these at Madison Square Garden. This one was at the United Center in Chicago, the Champions Classic, and they're all blue blood programs. They're all ranked in the top 10, and it's great excitement to kick off the season. So in the opening game, Duke beat Michigan State, and then in the nightcap, number 1 Kansas beat Kentucky. Well, Kentucky's 17, but they'll get better because John Calipari has gone back to his old style of bringing in the top high school kids coming out. He did something with transfers for the last couple of years. That didn't work out. So he's gone back to getting the best talent and getting them ready for the NBA. So he's got a team that's going to get better as the year goes by. And actually, they had a lead on Kansas. They were up by 14 with 16 minutes to play, but Kansas came back to win 89-84. The significant thing for me in looking at this game, and I didn't watch it, but I did look at some of the highlights and looked at the box score. Hunter Dickinson. Remember Hunter Dickinson went to DeMatha, and he apparently didn't feel like he was recruited hard enough by Mark Turgeon at Maryland. So he signed with Michigan and made it a point to really play well against Maryland, and then did a lot of woofing as he ran by the Maryland bench. Like, hey, look at what you could have had here. So he spends 3 years at Michigan. He doesn't lead them to a national title, but he plays very well, and then went shopping his services in the offseason in the transfer portal. And I'm told it was a lot about money, and I've been told, I don't know if this is exactly accurate, but I bet it's in the ballpark, he was looking for a deal that would pay him $250,000 a year. And he may have gotten even more than that to go to Kansas. I don't know. He's got 2 years of eligibility, play this year and next year. And in the upside-down world of college basketball, that's where the big men thrive now. They don't thrive in the NBA unless your name is Wembanyama. And so he may make his most money playing in college this year and next year at Kansas. But the night he had against Kentucky last night, 27 points and 21 rebounds. You know, the last guy who was putting up those kind of numbers at Kansas, his name was Wilt Chamberlain back in the 1950s. That's an unbelievable night. And he, did a lot of woofing as he went up and down the court. That's what he does. But he was really spectacular last night. And, he said the coach told him that he should get 10 rebounds a game. Well, he got 21 last night, so he's pretty happy with that. Speaking of the changes in college basketball, this was fun yesterday. Jay Billis was on the Dan Patrick Show. And this little history lesson for you youngsters out there, and if you're old enough to remember, you certainly remember Paul Westhead, who was the coach of the Lakers when they won the championship in 1980 with rookie Magic Johnson. But then he got fired, ironically, because his offense didn't have a high enough pace. So he went to Loyola Marymount, and he ran a system where the goal was to get off as many shots as you could. If they're three-pointers, great. If not, just get the ball up, and we'll outshoot them, and we'll outscore them, which is what they did. And they got to the Final Eight. They had a player named Hank Gathers who incredibly, tragically, died on the court, collapsed and died during a game. And they went on without him, still made the Final Eight, and his offense is legendary. So yesterday with Billis on with Dan, both of them, Dan's in his 60s, and I guess Jay must be in his 50s now, they got to talking about how the game is now very similar to what Paul Westhead tried to put together with Loyola Marymount 30 years ago.
Paul Westhead, who I had a kind of a connection to, I went to high school with his daughters, Monica and Patrice, at Rolling Hills High School in California. And I also played with Jack McKinney's son, John, when he fell off the bike and all that stuff happened with the Showtime Lakers right around 1980, 81, give or take, when I was a sophomore and junior in high school. And I think when Westhead got kind of bounced around a little bit, it seemed like he said, "Okay, you want me to play fast? I want to play fast." And I remember looking at, I was an grad assistant at Duke at the time, and I remember looking at like press guides of opponents, and everybody had their career high against Loyola Marymount. Everybody. If they played them, that was every player's career high because the scores were up in the 120s and sometimes 130. But yeah, they ran and defense was not at a premium. Even though like Westhead grew up in the Philly kind of LaSalle, St. Joe's tree, where that's not the way they played. But yeah, I think they were a little bit ahead of their time. But I think you can balance it and run, get easy baskets, quick threes. I mean, you'd rather have a three in transition than work 20 seconds to get one where it's going to be more contested. It's not always true, but that's that. I think back then, Dan, we didn't understand because the three came into college in '87, and we didn't understand the asymmetrical threat it was. Remember back then when Pitino was at Providence, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, look at all the threes they're shooting! What, they shoot 12 a game? Now you shoot 12 in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, and
it's a totally different game now, but it's opened things up, and it's a little bit more exciting game. But I'll tell you what, like the people our age that are going, geez, these big guys, they don't know how to play. Like, they're having to guard ball screens and recover, and they're guarding multiple actions, and you worry when they pick up a foul. Holy cow. Like, my biggest task was I had to meet my assignment at the free throw line and fight him for low post position. That was the end of it. I never guarded a ball screen in college.
But I go back to that Pitino Providence team with Billy Donovan. I mean, that wasn't a great team as much as it felt like it was a system. Like he had a system before. Nolan Richardson had a system, but, that was defense. But here was Pitino. I mean, he was so far ahead of his time with utilizing the three-point shot as a weapon.
He always has been in everything. He's probably, along with Bob Knight, maybe the best teacher of the game I've come across. But, he's going to look to what's his advantage. I mean, a lot of, Dan, you've seen this as much as I have. A lot of coaches will talk about how they want to play, and maybe not enough think about how are we going to win. Doesn't matter how I want to play. How are we going to win with the personnel we have? And Pitino's always been at the forefront of how are we going to win.
That's Jay Billis, who did the games last night, the doubleheader that was played in Chicago with Duke beating Michigan State and Kansas topping Kentucky. Be interesting to see where these teams are at the end of the year. I think Calipari, as he usually does, has a team that gets better during the year because he's taking in all these freshmen who have to get used to college basketball, whereas Kansas brings in Hunter Dickinson. He's already played 3 years at a high level in the Big Ten and was dominant last night. Keep an eye on Dickinson because the college game is different than the pro game. And, it's kind of vice versa the way it used to be, where if you were big, you got to the NBA right away, and it was a big man's game. Now, the NBA is not a big man's game, although the big men play like little men, like Wembanyama plays the way he does. But it's more of a post game, I guess, in college basketball now. So Zach Edey, the 7'4" center, the plotting 7'4" center for Purdue, which, by the way, got knocked out in the first round of the NCAA tournament by Fairleigh Dickinson, he was player of the year. And Dickinson, no relation to the college, Hunter Dickinson, he may wind up with that award this year, another 7-footer. It's kind of an upside-down world for those of us who grew up with a style of basketball that is totally different from the way it's played today. Coming up in the next hour, what Mike Locksley has to say about the matchup for Maryland against Michigan on Saturday, and Deion Sanders sounding off on those who might speculate that he would take the money and go to Texas A&M. Ha! What Deion says about that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Yeah, we get started at 9 every day, but roll through the 10 o'clock hour. And on Wednesdays, we have the Tony Kornheiser Show at 11 o'clock. Usually takes Tuesday and Thursday off, but sometimes he shifts that around a little bit as well. But we got a Tony Show coming up today. The breaking news that everybody's jumping on right now is that Deshaun Watson, the Browns quarterback who led them to this huge win on Sunday at Baltimore, 33-31. He's out for the rest of the year. Broke a bone in his shoulder, played with it in the second half, but then they found out on Monday with an MRI that the need is for season-ending shoulder surgery. So the $240 million contract quarterback is not going to play at all the rest of the year for a Super Bowl caliber defense. It's so Cleveland Brownie. It's unbelievable. It's just like Charlie Brown and Lucy yanking out the football. Like the Browns get on a flight back to Cleveland from Baltimore on Sunday, feeling like we're there. They've pulled to within a half a game of the Ravens. The Ravens are 7-3, Browns are 6-3, and they've beaten them on their home field. And if they get another shot at them in the playoffs, they got the confidence to maybe beat them. And now they're going to have to go the rest of the way with a backup quarterback, Josh Dobbs, who's been a remarkable story, spending the first half of the season with Arizona, now coming to Minnesota and winning the last 2 games for them, the last one as a starter, and putting them in a position to be in the playoffs without their quarterback, Kirk Cousins. He could have done the same thing for the Browns. Nope, he's in Minnesota now, and they're in big trouble. They got to find themselves a quarterback, and it's not going to be on somebody else's roster because the trade deadline has passed. You got to find somebody, and I'm sure RG3 has his nose pressed up against the glass of the Browns headquarters, but he hasn't been there since 2016 and hasn't played in the NFL since 2021, if I'm not mistaken. Might even be 2020, but he did spend a few years with the Ravens as a backup there, but, and said this 2018 that his proudest accomplishment, he said, never mind the rookie of the year and the 20 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions, 850 yards rushing, winning the division with the Redskins in 2012. No. His greatest accomplishment, he said, was helping Lamar Jackson become MVP. Oh, please. The Ravens don't want you. Maybe the Browns do, and maybe it'll happen today. But that was a real stunner when that broke earlier this morning. Before I get to Mike Locksley and his outlook for Maryland as they take on Michigan on Saturday in College Park, Rick Mace has been doing a series of stories about how investments from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Qatar are impacting sports and the investments that they're making. We've already seen what's happened to golf. It's totally turned that sport upside down. Ted Leonsis has taken advantage of this Middle East money as well. And as Mace writes, in July, he became the first U.S. sports owner to take on Middle East investment. And he said in a recent interview, this is Ted Leonsis, he said, "You'll see, I believe other teams in other leagues will be embracing pension funds, college endowments, university endowments, and sovereign wealth funds as investors as part of the tapestry of their investment base." Now, Ted owns 7 teams, including, of course, the Wizards and the Capitals and the Mystics. And he said in an interview as well, he said, "We all feel great when Forbes comes out and says, this is how much you're worth and how much your teams are worth. But when the rubber hits the road, it's, well, the company's worth X. Write us a check. Most of us in sports, we're not profitable. We're not wildly profitable." Well, you're either profitable or not. You're not wildly profitable, I would think. And so he's saying it's a real issue. And Mace goes on to write, in 2020, a pair of sports-specific private equity firms were approved by U.S. leagues, the NFL being the lone exception, to begin making minor investments in teams. But the restriction was no more than 5 deals per league and no more than 20% in the team. And Ted said about that, well, yeah, that was really great. They're not like limited partners, not like another owner who sits in the owner's box and tells you what to do and, who to hire as a coach and things like that. So it was good on that end. But he said the funds were too small to help every team that might be interested. As a partner in his own investment firm, he knew there was much more untapped money to be had. It's not like the spigot opened through these funds, he said, these American investors, the sports partners that came in. So in 2021, Leonsis spoke to the NBA's Advisory Finance Committee at the annual owners' meetings, pointing out how much money the league had closed itself off to. For example, the 10 largest sovereign wealth funds in the world control more than $8.5 trillion in assets. Norway is the world's largest with $1.47 trillion in assets, and some sovereign wealth funds are controlled by states, including Alaska, Hawaii, and West Virginia. Yeah, Norway would be okay, but they don't seem to be interested in sports washing is what it's really going on here. In 2022, NBA owners approved unanimously amending league rules, capping investments at 20% and ensuring the funds could only be passive partners. This summer, Leonsis became the first NBA or NHL owner to take advantage of those rules, selling 5% stake in Monumental Sports to the Qatar Investment Authority, the QIA, for approximately $200 million. And Ted said this. He said, "I don't view QIA as partners. I view them as investors, and I'm aligned with their investment philosophy, which is, we believe in you, Ted, and Monumental Management as managers, where you're fiduciary to all your partners to do the right things in the right way, and we are not involved." So he's basically saying this is money, and they don't really, they're not really asking for any kind of involvement. We'll see. Now they don't. Adam Silver was asked about this, about, hey, this money that's coming in from the Middle East, what do you think? And he said he doesn't anticipate any sovereign wealth funds becoming controlling owners of the franchise in his league in the foreseeable future. Yeah, of course, it starts out that way. Well, okay, fine. We also know that Qatar has shown support for Hamas in the past, and we know what's going on in the world right now with that. We just had 200,000 people show up for a rally yesterday in support of Israel right here in the nation's capital. Monica Dixon, a Monumental executive, replied in an October 30th letter saying, "We absolutely share your horror at the recent atrocities perpetrated by Hamas against Israel," but also notes that the QIA, this Qatar investment, QIA's minority investment is passive, and QIA has no governance rights and no ability to direct, control, or influence our teams or our business. Yeah, okay, that's kind of the way it started out in golf, right? And where is it now? Where is it now? And Leonsis said in a September interview that Qatar will have no visible presence at Capitals, Wizards, or Mystics games. So he's taking the money. He's kind of recognizing that this is blood money, but he's saying, they don't have any say over the team, and you're not going to have to look at them. It's just money, and I need this because, well, even though I own 7 teams and they're worth X amount of billions, Yeah, I just don't have enough cash to keep it going. And again, this odd statement here: we're not profitable, we're not wildly profitable. Well, if you're profitable and your teams continue to go up in money, it would seem that you don't necessarily need this kind of investment. And I guess Ted is willing to take the criticism for it. I would imagine that a fair amount of the ticket base is Jewish, and that there is a sympathetic view towards Israel and what is going on here. So I don't see this as really good for Ted in business, but Ted has forgotten more about business than I'll ever know. It just seems icky. It just seems very, very icky. And I know that if Abe Pollin were alive and running those teams, which he used to own and sold to Ted, he wouldn't be taking that money. You can be sure of that. Now, maybe Ted is more in line with what new school thinking will be. And as he said, you'll see, I believe other teams in other leagues will be embracing pension funds, college endowments, university endowments, and sovereign wealth funds as investors, as part of the tapestry of their investment base. Feels icky. Feels like this is the tip of the iceberg, and the ship may run aground on that iceberg. See what's going on in the world of golf right now. All right, let me get to Maryland. Maryland is a 21-point underdog against Michigan on Saturday. It shows you what the odds makers think of how Michigan is dealing with their crisis and their coach being suspended. That could change when he goes to court on Friday to see if he'll be allowed to travel with the team and come here to College Park on Saturday when Michigan kicks off at noon against Maryland. This was Mike Locksley with his news conference yesterday. We'll get to what he said about the Michigan situation, but he was in a feisty mood, and somebody served him up a 3-0 fastball on penalties. I guess he's been hearing about what a dirty team he has, and Locksley was more than anxious to set the record straight.
We were 22nd in the country in penalties, and all I hear every time we get a penalty is how undisciplined we are and how undisciplined this team is, and I ain't buying it. Every week I turn in plays to the Big Ten, and I'm not going to get fined, but I'm going to tell you, and you guys need to hear it, just because they throw a flag does not mean that it was actually a penalty. I mean, in the game it counts, but, I'm not going to buy it. This team is a disciplined team. We just get, I don't know how, why, or what, but things don't go our way. And, I've been on the phone with Bill Corolla a couple of times the last couple of weeks. Am I disappointed? No doubt. I don't like our guys getting penalties. I don't like our guys, doing the things. I always talk about non-competitive penalties. Those are the ones I have a problem with. But I'm not going to have that label of being undisciplined put on these guys, because these players have good discipline.
Yeah, and he does enforce that. He had a player early in the season, I forget the running back's name, but it was against Virginia, and he had an unnecessary roughness penalty during a drive. I guess he was pushed out of bounds, and he pushed somebody back. Locksley benched him for the rest of the game, didn't play him. So, he says, look at the numbers here, and we are 22nd. There's 130 college football teams, so they're 22nd. They're not anywhere near in penalties, except that he says we're getting penalties that aren't penalties. Well, maybe because of their reputation, and so he's pretty hot about that. And I thought that was one of the interesting things he said yesterday. This is about what's going on at Michigan, and everything, I guess, becomes a distraction when you're 18 to 22 years old, and I'm sure all the players are following what's going on with that. And so this is the question about how he's dealing with his players who have to deal with everything they're hearing about what's going on with Jim Harbaugh and the University of Michigan.
18 to 22-year-olds are going to do what they do. I mean, they live in the information world, but as we've learned around here, none of that has anything to do with us, and it's not any of our business what's going on up at Michigan. We need to really focus on the things that we can control and the things that we have to do. And our standard is to, again, worry about the Terps and make sure that we put the best version of the Terps out on the field, executing the things we need to get executed. What's going on up in Ann Arbor has nothing to do with us.
Yeah, that's not going to be as easy a sell to his players as he makes it sound. But okay, that's part of it. Last thing is Well, Michigan's got your signals. You pretty much know that, right? I mean, they've been caught red-handed. They've admitted they were cheating. It's just a question of whether they were dealt with fairly in all of this. Former Michigan and current Maryland offensive coordinator Josh Gaddis was named in a report last month surrounding the Stallions operation. Connor Stallions, that's the guy who's the center of all this. So when they were working together at Michigan, they may have been doing each other favors and making sure that these signs got passed along and so forth. Now Gaddis is here. Does he actually help Locksley, tell you what Michigan's doing? But also, here's Locksley. He's got to be aware that Michigan probably has his signals. So, as he says, he's changed them.
Once we heard that 2-3 weeks ago, we made a lot of the necessary adjustments, because if one has them, as you read and hear, anybody can have them. And so we've taken necessary precautions to just make sure that, again, what we can control, on offense, defense, we've definitely mixed up our communications and how we're able to do it. And so, we don't feel like that will have any effect on our game.
Is that a difficult process because guys kind of get into a routine?
It is what it is. I mean, playing Michigan is a difficult process, but it's on the schedule and we play them. So we do the work, whatever's necessary to give us a chance to compete. So, yeah, we got it done.
Yeah. And Talia Tungavailoa, the quarterback, was asked about that. He says, I think we do have to change a couple of our signals. Usually when I do checks on the field, I've got a signal to receivers to play. So obviously things like that is on film. So he knows that he's got to change things around. How they'll be able to do it, who knows? I mean, this is a much better football team. Let's face it. This is a team that just doesn't lose. They're 10-0 this year. And on top of that, they're going for their 1,000th win in program history. How about that? Michigan would be the winning. Well, they are the winningest college football program of all time, but they would hit that big round number of 1,000 if they get it done at College Park on Saturday. And they have really played great defense. They are holding their opponents to 7.5 points a game. So Maryland, which couldn't get it done against Penn State. I don't know offensively, although they've got some pretty good receivers. They got some pretty good offensive talent. They may score against Michigan, but I don't see any way they're going to stop them. And remember how Michigan ended their game last week against Penn State. They ran it 32 straight times. They can run the football. Maryland just doesn't have the depth and the size to really hang with them. So it would be a monumental upset if they get it done. And I also wonder about this. Maryland's goals kind of changed in the middle of the year when they had those two ugly losses, one in homecoming to Illinois, and then they lost at Northwestern. And then the focus shifted from, can we compete for the Big Ten title, which is what Locksley predicted at the beginning of the year that they would, to will we even become bowl eligible? And I think there was a big sigh of relief when they got it done with a walk-off field goal last week at Nebraska. And now they are bowl eligible. They'll be in, but 6-6, they're still in. It's a lot more impressive if they can get in at 8-4, but that means a big upset against Michigan on Saturday, and then they have to go to Rutgers, which they've been bowl eligible for a while, and they gave Ohio State a game for a while last week. So they're going to be a tough team to beat. So Maryland is in, and I wonder if there'll be a little bit of a sigh of relief of that, and will they have the intensity to beat Michigan? Locksley is saying that's not going to happen, but who knows? Human nature is to let down a little bit when you've accomplished a goal, so to speak. Deion Sanders, his name being thrown around for the Texas A&M job. Wait till you hear what Deion has to say about that. We'll get to that and more as we continue with the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Got Tony at 11. Oh, the deals the Cleveland Browns made and didn't make. In the preseason, they had Josh Dobbs on the roster. They looked at Deshaun Watson, and they said, we're good. We're going to trade Josh Dobbs to the Arizona Cardinals, who cut Colt McCoy. It looked like Colt McCoy was going to be the starter for at least the first part of the season until Kyler Murray got back, which he did last week. And that didn't happen. They cut him at the end. I guess Colt McCoy hadn't caught on with anybody. That's actually a name that could wind up in Cleveland. That's where he started. Wouldn't that be ironic? Because they're desperate now. If you're just jumping in your car, just find out Deshaun Watson's out for the year, needs shoulder surgery, broke a bone in his shoulder during the game against the Ravens on Sunday, finished it, but the MRI showed that he needs the surgery and will miss the rest of the year. Then at the trade deadline, there was some discussion that they would make a deal for Jacoby Brissett here, who was the starting quarterback last year in Cleveland until Watson got off suspension, so he knows their system, could step right in. They didn't do that. Whether the Commanders didn't come up with the right deal for them or whether they didn't offer enough, who knows? But now they're really in bad shape, and those are two things that maybe they can kick themselves about, that they traded Josh Dobbs before the season and didn't trade for Jacoby Brissett, and now they got a Super Bowl caliber defense with no quarterback. That's a mess for them. Sally Jenkins writes today, Washington Post, about what's going on at Texas A&M with the big buyout for Jimbo Fisher, close to $77 million not to coach. He gets all the money. There's no offset, meaning if he takes another job, they don't subtract from what Texas A&M owes him. And she puts this in very good perspective and brings up a point that I hadn't really thought about. And I'll get to that here in a second. But she writes, Texas A&M's preposterous buyout of Jimbo Fisher, paying him around $76 million not to coach, robs dollars of meaning. It detaches them from any rationale or coherence, renders them mere tokens. Things that should mean the most are valued the least, and coin has all the worth of tiddlywinks. And, she goes to talk about the boosters who kicked in all this money. And she says, when you break the meaning of money, what you're liable to get in return is nothing. And she says the broad outrage and derision directed at Texas A&M for its buyout of Fisher are not just based on the collective sense that the public university has such badly disoriented priorities, but in a perception that there is something broadly destructive in its behavior, something bankrupting. In 2021, the school gave Fisher a ludicrous contract extension, a 10-year fully guaranteed deal, $9 million a year. But in 2031, Fisher will have been paid $118 million for 6 years of fair to Midland work with a record of 45-25. It's more than triple of any other college coaching buyout. Money is a measure of respect, among other things, but there is something inversely contemptuous and disrespectful in Texas A&M, a suggestion that a college football team is no more or less a worthwhile pursuit than any other rich man's ridiculously expensive acquisition, such as his yacht size. We know a little man from here who has a big yacht, don't we? She says when you break, and this is where she gets to something that I really hadn't thought of in regards to the money and the effect that it may have played on the Texas A&M program. Listen carefully to this because I think this makes a lot of sense. Sally Jenkins writes, when you break the meaning of value, it creates a cascade of deteriorating values organizationally. Fisher was paid so much that it skewed perspectives across the board. Given the size of his contract, he didn't dare go about it in any other way than what his employers wanted him to do. He had to scoop every available blue chipper to show that he was, quote, winning in the recruiting wars. How many times was his instinct or inclination to go for a lesser-rated but desirous kid smothered by the specter of contractual and donor expectation? How much did he forfeit chemistry for talent? According to ESPN, the Aggies signed 70 players ranked in the top 300 under Fisher, behind only Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. And in 2022, they had the number one recruiting class overall. And yet, they're not very good. So this is a very good point, and it reminded me the movie Miracle, where Kurt Russell plays Herb Brooks and should have won an Academy Award for it. He was great. But the scene where he's selecting the U.S. Olympic team, and it's a 3-day camp where they bring in all these college kids. This is 1980, and he's going to put together a team that's going to play for the Olympic gold medal, the most famous upset in the history of sports when they beat the Soviets. But while this tryout is going on, he after like one practice, he goes to his assistant coach, I think played by Noah Wiley, and says, here's the team. And he says, wait a minute, you only had one practice. How do you know who the best players are? He says, I don't need the best players. I need the right players. And that's a big part of putting together a team. That Jimbo Fisher, because he was paid so much money, was beholden to the people who paid him that money, and he had to show up with the number one recruiting class. Remember when Nick Saban said that Texas A&M bought all their players? Yeah, that was a part of it. That he, regardless of how he thought they were going to fit his system, if they were highly ranked, he had to show his bosses, hey, you paid me all this money, look what I can do. I can bring in all these recruits. And in doing so, may not have put together the best team. Maybe he had the best talent, but he didn't have the best team. That's a great point that I really hadn't thought of. So hats off to Sally once again for a great column on that. Meantime, Deion Sanders' name has come up, even though they have fallen big time. I mean, they started off 3-0. They're now 4-6 at Colorado. But Deion is the guy who can step onto your campus and create a lot of excitement. And kids want to play for him because he gets them a lot of money in NIL deals. And, you know, his son got his Rolls Royce booted on the campus of Colorado. You need to know more about that. That's part of the big picture. And that because of that, his name is being thrown around for the Texas A&M job. So yesterday at his news conference, his weekly news conference, he was asked about that and gave a Deion-like answer.
When you don't care about the noise for us wherever else, but parents do, they hear it. When they come to you and say,
what parents have heard it that you know of? That
parents who have X, I would imagine,
have come to me. I mean, you making an assumption. I want to know
an
what
assumption.
Parents have come.
Have any come to you? Do they say to you, what would you say to them if they said, are you going to coach my kid? Are you going to be here in 2-3 years to coach my kid? What do you tell them? What do you say to them?
I tell them what I told them when they came. I'm here. Like I tell them my mother's here, my sister's here, my dog is here, my daughter's here, three of my sons are here. My other daughter comes during every home game. We're here. I get mail here. I claim taxes here. I pay taxes here. I'm sorry. I'm here. I don't hear that. I don't hear that. Maybe our recruiting staff hears it, but I don't hear it. I'm too honest, not with parents, and I'm going to tell them the truth.
Deion, okay. Well, he says things that don't exactly match up with what becomes the truth. Like he wasn't going to leave Jackson State, that he left Jackson State. It's like, when I said that, I didn't know this, so who knows. But I would think he's going to stay another year at Colorado. And look, if this team winds up with 4 or 5 wins, can you really bring him in on a red carpet to Texas A&M? I think he's got another year to prove that he can do what he says he's going to do. He didn't bring in a lot of big guys, a lot of linemen this year at Colorado, and he's saying his 2 sons are going to stay for another year. I think they owe it to him to do that, so he's going to have a top quarterback and a top defensive back next year. The kid, his name escapes me, the one who plays both ways, he's got another year that he's got to play college football. So he's going to have a team around him. It's just a question of how they how they work it out and what kind of team he's able to put together and how successful they are next year. I could see him going the year after next, but I would be surprised if he leaves Colorado after only 1 year on the job. Let me shift to the Commanders here. And I hope this audio is going to work out. This is a part of conversation that Chick Hernandez has with Ron Rivera every Monday. So after Rivera holds his news conference with the media, after he's had a chance to look at the tape, he sits down with Chick, and they do about 10 minutes, and they air a minute or 2, maybe 3 minutes on the news on Channel 9. And you can watch the whole interview on their website at WUSA 9. It's also up on YouTube. So this struck me because it's a little different than what I've been hearing from Rivera. And you know that almost every time Rivera opens his mouth, no matter what it is, you can ask him about the weather, and he'll tell you that Sam Howell is developing. That's his go-to. You ask him about the defense, he tells you it's about Sam Howell. You ask him why they don't run the ball enough, he says, well, we got to have Sam Howell out there throwing. It's always Sam Howell. And the implication of seemingly for everything he says is, look at me, I developed Sam Howell. So this was Monday with Chick Hernandez of WUSA 9 talking to Rivera, asking this question, and listen carefully how Rivera answers it.
2,952 yards for Sam Howell through the first 11 games. That is the 5th in NFL history, behind Pat Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Andrew Luck, and a guy named Cam Newton. Is there any doubt in your mind now that Sam Howell is the dude for the future of this franchise?
I think Sam can be the dude for this.
So can be, not definitive.
He can be. Again, he's still growing. He's still developing. And again, one of the things that we've got to be able to do, and this is the mentality I had when I was in Carolina with Cam Newton, and that was we've got to protect the quarterback and playmakers around him. More so than anything else, and that's what we got to be able to do. Right now, we've been able to protect them for the most part the last few weeks. We've made some lineup changes, and we got some young guys out there that are doing a good job, and we got some veteran guys that are working and doing a good job as well. So it's headed in that direction. It really is. I mean, he is by no means arrived as a player,
right?
But he's still growing and learning and developing in the scheme. The scheme is still kind of morphing to fit him and his abilities and the playmakers around him.
Right.
You know, so with a little time, I think these guys, these players will really kind of come together. I think we'll come together as an offense, but we're still growing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some great examples on the tape of missed opportunities on the offensive side that we could have had that a more veteran, you know, a more veteran Sam Howell is going to see and make those plays.
Okay, so again, the answer to the question, is he your guy? He can be our guy or can be the dude. Okay, so that's a little bit different. Like he's hedging a little bit. Just kind of surprised about that. Not that it's not the truth, and not that it's diametrically different from anything he said, but for weeks and weeks and weeks, Sam Howell, developing. Sam Howell, look at Sam Howell. Don't look over there, look over there, look at Sam. And then when asked the direct question, well, look at these numbers, which Chick gave you, all the quarterbacks through 11 games who've had those type of numbers, the yards passing, 2,800 yards passing, you know, some of the guys who are considered to be franchise quarterbacks now, and Howell is right there with them. Well, are you ready to say he's a franchise quarterback? Well, he can be. So we'll see. I think what's happened with Rivera is I think he knows he's not going to be back next year, and he wants to leave behind a quarterback who he says, look at that, I developed that. So if anybody else wants to hire me, maybe I can do that for your franchise too. So I thought that was a little bit different than what we've been hearing. And I thought Chick put the question very well, and I think the answer to it was quite telling from Ron Rivera. He's sold, but he's not 100% sold. He's sold to a large degree. Let's put it that way. And all the selling that he's been doing to the media in the news conferences, when he has a sit down like that, it's a little bit different. One other thing, Commanders related, and they're back on the practice field today. They're 10-point favorites going into the Giants game on Sunday. And that is the story that's been – I don't think there's a lot to it. It doesn't seem to make any sense. But Mike Florio is spreading it around, and others seem to be kind of thinking it might head in that direction. Just observing what I've observed from Josh Harris and his group, I just don't see them doing this. But the name Bill Belichick is being thrown around as a name that could wind up here, that Josh Harris at the end of the season fires Ron Rivera and he brings in Belichick because of Belichick's track record. Now you have to give him both jobs. You have to make him the general manager and you have to make him the coach, and you have to stay out of his way. Now, one thing we've seen from Harris, he's willing to do that. And I don't think the trades, maybe they were the trades that were made at the deadline where they got rid of Sweat and Young for not too much, just draft picks. Maybe that was at his direction, maybe not. I don't know. But he does appear to be hands-off, and I just don't see where he could bring in a guy like Belichick and then watch what has happened in New England in the last few years, where Belichick has proven he's really crappy at building a roster that doesn't have Tom Brady, that he would come in here and face that. But this was interesting from yesterday. As Rivera says, it's interesting, not necessarily important. You had Dan Orlovsky on the Pat McAfee show, and they got around to Belichick, and Orlovsky dropped something that has people going, who, whoa, wait a minute. Again, yesterday, Pat McAfee show with Dan Orlovsky, ESPN.
Now, Diana Rossini reported this weekend that people around the building are assuming or preparing for a mutual parting of ways between Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. He will go coach somewhere else if that is the case. Will he be the GM as well? We assume, but who knows? That would be bananas. That would be a colossal move in the NFL news cycle.
I've heard that. I've heard more and more of that over the past week. I'm not a reporter, all that stuff, but I have heard that.
You're a journalist.
I have heard that that's going to be the case, and it's kind of who knows the likelihood of it, but I've heard that that's going to happen, and I've heard the location is already kind of determined as well.
Where he's going?
L.A.
Chargers.
I'm not giving. I've heard that.
Who'd you hear from?
I've heard that.
I don't know. This is kind of the media world that we deal in now. You used to have sources, multiple sources. You used to have some strong evidence when you're reporting something. He's not reporting it. He's just, this is what you can do now. You can just throw it around. This is what Mike Florio does. Mike Florio is not reporting something. He says, I'm hearing this. I'm hearing that the Commander. Well, if Orlovsky is saying a deal is already done, then, and if it is the Commanders, Josh Harris is guilty of tampering because Bill Belichick has a long-term contract. Now, he may have been given permission by Bob Kraft to shop himself around. That could be part of the picture. But by leaking it out earlier this season that Belichick had signed a long-term deal in the offseason, it was to tell other teams, hey, if you want him, you're going to have to trade for him. I don't know if you're going to trade for a guy who's 71 years old and has put together a team this year that looks horrendous. They looked really bad against the Commanders, and they looked even worse in Germany against the Colts, and they're not going to be in the playoffs. They may win 4, maybe 5 games this year. But this is an unbelievable decline since Tom Brady left, and it's completely ended the debate whether it's Belichick or Brady. And now you're going to bring him into Washington and hope that he's still got the magic that he had with Brady when he's not going to have Brady anymore, unless Brady wants to make a comeback and play here at the age of, 46 or 47. So I don't know how that's all going to work out. But it just doesn't seem like it can happen. So when Orlovsky says, yeah, they already know where he's going to go, what does that mean? And could it mean, here's something else, could it mean necessarily NFL? Here's something. The Notre Dame has lost 3 games this year. Notre Dame and Bill Belichick. This actually used to happen with Don Shula. His name used to come up for Notre Dame. And given, Belichick's one last itch to scratch, maybe college football, and, he looks at his buddy Nick Saban. Maybe he's thinking that might be the place. That might be a move. Might be a move to make. You don't make the kind of money at Notre Dame that you make at other schools, but given how Bill Belichick loves history, might he be interested in trying to make a run at a national title at Notre Dame, which nobody really has been able to do since Lou Holtz did it, and that's over 30 years ago. Could he be the one who steps in there and does that? Brian Kelly gave up. He got close. He got him to the national championship game, but they got their doors blown off by Alabama. Could Bill Belichick be interested in that? That's something that nobody's really talking about now. But I remember when Shula was getting to the end there in Miami, that his name was being thrown around for Notre Dame, and he wound up staying with the Dolphins and has more wins than anybody. Also, that's another factor in all of this. Does Belichick, who is now still, 16 behind Shula for all-time wins, does he definitely want to get that? If he goes to Notre Dame, he doesn't. He doesn't get another opportunity unless he comes back to the pros after that to try and get it. So a lot of things in the air right now, but when Orlovsky throws that little nugget in there, like, it's already known where he's going to go next year. Well, where is that? Oh, no, I can't say on that. All right, Tony's coming up next. I got a show tomorrow. I'm going to have on Joe Posnanski, who wrote Why We Love Baseball. Looking forward to talking to him tomorrow as well. So enjoy the rest of the day. Tony is coming up next. I'll see you tomorrow, 9 a.m.